How powerful is Cox Internet? So powerful that one day, your daughter will be able to simulate a soccer match against some of the world's best players right from your backyard. Get gig speeds powered by fiber from Cox. It's internet built for tomorrow, today. Internet delivered through Cox's hybrid fiber coax network. Speeds vary and are not guaranteed. Cox terms and other restrictions apply.
Match believes that adults date better because when you date as an adult, you get to be a little irresponsible with really responsible people. Rip the clothes off someone who actually knows how to put them away. Fall stupidly in love with someone who's actually really smart. Forget being hot. Get them to ugly laugh. Ready to crush on someone who makes you feel whole? If you know who you are and what you want in a relationship, Match is the place for you. Adults wanted. Download the Match app today.
When I was living in Greece, I would hike up in the mountains every day, and there was this little spot that we'd go and watch the sunset. And I remember it was the last day I was watching it, and I was crying, and I was realizing that what stood between me seeing everything I'd seen over the 6 months and people that were sitting at home was paperwork. It was the paperwork that was holding them back. And that moment, I realized I don't want paperwork, a job, or anything to hold me back from what's really out there in the world.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to episode 3 of the Inspired by Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Falonipe, and this is the podcast for travel lovers and adventure seekers. And in this episode, I have spoken with Mickelle Sleyster. Mickelle is a digital nomad, an entrepreneur, a digital nomad coach who talks about experiences getting started with traveling, how she got a taste of travel and how she fell in love with it, the challenges she's been through her journeys over the years and how she's overcome them, and how she helps people like you, people who are maybe aspiring to travel or just thinking if travel is a really attainable thing, how she helps them get on the road, to get the mindset right. And this is some of the things that we will be talking about in this episode. And if you are new here, I want to say thank you. Thank you for joining. And wherever you found us through, I want to say that you've landed on a pretty interesting podcast. And this is where we talk about travel and how to inspire you to get to traveling as well. So if you have not followed us, make sure you do that. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you get it from. And also have a listen to this podcast if it's your first time, and leave us a feedback. Hopefully we deserve a 5 stars from you. And let us get into today's podcast without further ado. And I really hope that you enjoy it. And I will see you on the other side, my friend. All right, Mickelle, thanks for joining me. How are you?
I am very good, really excited to be here today and getting to enjoy a little bit of sunshine, so I'm pretty happy.
Absolutely. So, I this is the third episode of the podcast, and you're literally like the first digital nomad that I will be interviewing on this show. So this is like one very special episode, which I'm excited about, and I'm just so excited to get into all of the things that we'll be discussing. I know there's no specific guideline on what we're going to talk about, so we're just gonna roll with it, see where the conversation takes us, and hopefully we can inspire some people to freedom.
Well, I'm ecstatic to be the first one and show the path.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, where are you right now?
Yeah, so right now I am in Boston. I just got back to the US about a week ago after a 5-month trip in Europe.
Wow, 5 months. You started traveling 5 months ago, or you've been traveling way before 5 months, and you just spent the last 5 months in Europe?
Yeah, so I just spent the past 5 months in Europe. I started digital nomading about March of 2020 when coronavirus was hitting the fan. I was in Peru traveling solo.
Wow. So you started traveling when the coronavirus hit. That's when you started, when a lot of people were thinking about, oh, let's go back home and let's reassess things. That's kind of strange, not very not what most people do.
Yeah, so I got my remote job in January. Well, it started in January of 2020. And so 60 days into the job, I was like, okay, I'm going to go travel. And so I flew to Peru, and that happened to be the third week of March. And on an intuitive feeling, ended up leaving. And within, I think it was 15 hours of me leaving, they completely closed the border. So I
Wow.
made it
So
out just
you
in time.
just in time. So you left the US and the bottle was shot.
Yeah. So,
So
which which was kind of interesting because the border ended up closing. I get back to the US and I only stayed in the US for about 2 months after that.
wow. So what was going through your mind at this time? Did you ever at any point think, "Oh, I think I may have messed up. I think I made the wrong choice. I'm in a foreign country where I know nobody, the virus is ravaging through the planet, and what do I do next?" Were you ever having this kind of thoughts at the time?
Um, Honestly, no. I totally underestimated the power of coronavirus and what it was going to do to my travel plans. My sister actually in November of 2019 was like, "You're not going to go to Asia. Coronavirus is coming." And I was like, "You don't know what you're talking about. I'm traveling the world." But once I did get back to the US, and obviously in April, all of the US shut down, that's when it really hit me that my travel plans could pretty much be over. And I was pretty down, but I ended up starting a new project during those 2 months that I was in quarantine, and trying to gain some value out of that experience.
Right. So what kept you going? What gave you the confidence that even though through whatever's going on in the world right now, you know what? I'm not looking back. I'm not even going to find a way to get back to the United States. I'm just going to keep, marching forward. Where did that confidence come from?
I think it was just really that ever desire to see the world. And even though I was seeing everything around me change, I knew that more than likely it was just going to get worse. And so I needed to
Mm,
utilize the time I had. And at this point, I didn't really have anything to lose. I was working
mm.
remotely, so I could still do my job. It was just a matter of going back and forth and deciding where am I going to go. But as far as the confidence goes, it was really just the fear of missing my chance to travel that pushed me to keep wanting to go.
Right. I mean, I totally relate to that. I mean, I have a similar story personally about, why I've decided to start traveling at this time. And I think for me, it's just a matter of if I don't do it now, I don't think I will ever do it, regardless of what's going on in my life. Because we always want to, like, find the perfect time, the perfect situation. I need to save this much money. I need to, have this thing, going on before I can start traveling. But knowing that, you know what, I have so much time. Like when I look at myself, I'm like, just it seemed like yesterday when I was 22 years old. Now I'm 28, and I feel like 6 years have just gone by without me knowing where they went. So I totally relate to that. So tell me a little bit about what your life looked like, in the conventional sense of the word. I am making air quotes now, because I just want our listeners to get an insight into what was your life like? What were you doing? How did travel come about? Just give us an insight into
Yeah.
that.
So I first got the idea of wanting to travel full time actually about 4 years ago. I was studying film in Greece and ended up doing 10 countries in 10 minutes. And I was interviewing a lot of people. And that really was where I got the idea. And I was like, wow, I'm really happy when I'm traveling. Well, coming out of that, I actually was in some debt and I needed to finish school and I didn't really have any experience. So I immediately start working for a recruiting company and honestly, I just dreaded most days. I was working like 12 hours a day, not making very
Mm,
good money, very miserable. And while I was working that job, I was like, if I could get into marketing, if I could get into a cool company, maybe I'll be happy. Like, I don't need this travel thing. So I ended up working for iHeartMedia's national office, which was awesome. I was
mm.
across the radio, I was planning iHeart events, going to concerts. And still about 6 months in, I just wasn't happy. And it was like a light switch went off. And that's when I really realized, okay, I need to figure out how to travel full time. And that's when I started budgeting and I started planning for
Hmm.
what I thought was going to be my travel plans going into 2020. Um, but before I was just working in marketing, working in HR. I probably did about 2 years experience between both of those things before I joined the remote workforce.
Right. So you had a pretty normal life, like everyone else, just working and, just living life. And did you see yourself, like, did it ever cross your mind at any point that, this travel thing, maybe it's just out of reach. Maybe I should just give it up. Maybe I should just have a normal life, just move on.
Yeah, honestly, all the time. Especially in the I would say it was about 3.5 months is what it really took me to find a remote job once I started putting time into it. But all of that time, I had a lot of doubt about it. Everyone around me basically thought I was crazy. They're like, you're not in tech, you're not going to be able to work online. My parents,
Right.
once I did end up getting a remote job, didn't even understand. Um, so I had to constantly pump myself up. And every morning I would just wake up and I'd be like, I've got to make it happen. So it was like
Right.
I would spend on average about 3 or 4 hours every night applying for jobs
Wow.
to
That's
find one.
to find one. So, did you know what you were looking for exactly as far as remote job goes, or were you just looking for anything that would have you work remote?
I knew that I wanted a flex schedule, so I wanted to not have to be tied to a time zone, and I
Hmm.
wanted the company to be cool with remote from the beginning.
Right.
Within 2 weeks, I started having companies reach out to me, and they'd be like, "Oh, maybe you could come in one day remote, or maybe in time you could have flex schedule." And so I just knew that I really wanted those two things. And so above all else, that's what I was looking for. But as far as what I was targeting, I would look at positions and look at transferable skills. Lucky for
Hmm.
me, I came from two really large companies. So my
Right.
resume was getting traction. Um, but as far as what I was specifically going for, I was looking at a lot of sales jobs and just really anything with flexibility in any type of way.
Right, right. I think I can relate to that as well because I, transitioned from sales to digital marketing. That's what I do right now full time. Besides all of this, creative projects that I have going on the side, and I was just looking for anything that would have me work remote. But I knew that I didn't want anything that had even the remote possibility of me coming into the office at any point in
Mm,
time because I just knew exactly what I wanted and what I wanted to be doing in a couple months, which is to travel. So that really made a lot of sense, for anyone who's listening right now who just wants to find a remote job as a means to probably start traveling. I mean, you need to understand that a lot of people, feel like to get into this remote job or remote work lifestyle, you need to have like, to be, tech savvy. You need to be a developer. You need to know a lot of, tech things. But I always tell people that regardless of what you're doing right now, as long as you have, transferable skills, you can definitely, find something. You just have to put in the work. I mean, for you, it took 4 months, right? Um, for me, it took about, I would say about 5 months to actually find something that, would really work for me. So it's not something that is going to happen overnight, definitely. So, but you need to like, start putting yourself out there and start applying to jobs, regardless of where you are right now. But before I go into, the I mean that aspect of your story, I want to go back to Greece. You said you were in Greece for a while. You studied film in Greece, and how did Greece come about? Like, what made you go to Greece?
Yeah, so basically, I was in college, and I straight up by end of my freshman year, I just really hated where I went to school. A lot of people weren't doing much with their time, or I didn't see very many people passionate about things, and so my immediate thought was like, I want to transfer universities. However,
Mm,
with the money and everything, it wasn't really gonna pan out. So I was like, hey, I'll study abroad, and I actually was supposed to study abroad in New Zealand, and it ended up falling through like 2 months before. And my career
wow.
advisor was like, hey, there's this school in Greece, why don't you apply here? And so ended up going out to Greece, and so grateful that I did, because I got to do so much traveling around Europe. And that was the first time that I had really ever left the US besides going to Mexico or anything.
Hmm.
So that was kind of the start of why I ended up in Greece. But I loved getting to study there, and also just getting to interview people. It was a really interesting way for me to get started in kind of the media spectrum and working on those type of projects.
Right, right. So, Greece was like your very first taste of travel, and that really put you on this path of indefinite travel. Did you have like any pushback from, say, friends, family, parents, on your decision to just pick up and go?
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone usually tends to have a lot to say about places that they've never visited.
For
And
sure.
so, like, my mom was just like saying the worst things, like, there's going to be all these gypsies, you're going to get attacked. Like, everyone just had like such these random stories. And so I remember when I arrived my first day in Greece, I like walked out of my apartment and I was like kind of tiptoeing. I was so nervous. And and immediately this bus drives by, and it had rained the night before, and all of the water like splashed me. And
Oh
in
my
that moment,
God.
I realized, I was like, I can't sit here and be in fear. Like, I need to just go at it, and I need to just walk around,
Right.
and I can't be tiptoeing. And that's what I needed, to just get hit with that dirty water to realize I'm going to be okay. This isn't the worst place ever. But yeah, it's insane how many people like thought I was crazy for doing that. And then once I really started traveling full time, everyone was like, how are you doing this? That's not possible. It's too expensive. You'll never find blah, blah, blah. And all of it just turned out to be like very wrong.
Right. I mean, I think we all, get this idea. I don't know where people get all these ideas from. I mean, most likely the media. There's a lot of things, being said in the media about certain places. I'm in Mexico City right now, and I know a lot of people talk about, narcos a lot. You go to Mexico, you're gonna get kidnapped. You will, something bad is going to happen. But I don't know why people cannot just do their research and understand that you will. I mean, not you can't really say that everywhere is 100% safe. Even the best countries in the world still have their own downsides, and you just have to be careful where you go and who you hang with, and not to do certain things like walk at midnight, anywhere, regardless of where it is. So yeah, I mean that really sounds very familiar because I've heard certain. I mean, I've heard the same things myself.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with that. And I think that's why my first trip, digital nomad trip, I ended up going to Peru, because my thought process was, if I, as a female solo traveler, can get myself through Peru, I can get myself through anywhere. And
Right.
I remember the day I was leaving, I was like so nervous, but also like on the brink of crying. And I got there and I was like, fine. So, like, just very dramatic. We read all these horrible things, and then like half of them just aren't even true at all.
Right. You know why I laughed so much was because I was just talking to another digital nomad here in Mexico City yesterday, and they told me about a similar experience, their first trip to South Africa about 9 years ago, where they just you just picked up and left. And while they were on the plane, they were panicking so much that they were just crying. And from everything that they've been told about going to Africa, like, you're gonna get mauled by a lion, you're gonna get killed, like, you're not gonna come back, you will be sold to a slave, in a slave market. Like, she picked up and left, and she was literally crying on the plane, like, what have I done? And when she got to South Africa, she realized that, wow, this is such a beautiful country, and it all turned out great. So that sounded very familiar to a conversation I was having yesterday. So let's so let's talk about um your first, I would say, few months into travel. Like, were you confident, with, now that you have, I mean, I would assume that now you have a job, that pays you, and you've started traveling. Were you at any point in time still, like, feeling some nerves about, this might come to an end? Like, it's always a job, right? You have a job, anything can happen. You get fired, you get laid off, whatever, but how did you stay confident in knowing that, this is going to go on no matter what?
Yeah, so in my case, when I got my remote job, it was a 90-day contract to hire. So after 60 days into the job, that's when I left for Peru. And I didn't tell the company. I just left. And my boss, I was on the phone with him, and he's like, "You're doing great. Like, how are you? How's Florida?" And I was like, "I'm not in Florida." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And then he was like, "Where are you?" And I ended up telling him. And surprisingly, he was like, "Oh, okay." And then it slowly turned into like, I'm going to Mexico, I'm going to Croatia, I'm going to all these places. But to answer your question, I just knew that if it didn't work out, no one was going to bail me out. And
For sure.
so pushing against that resistance of like, if this doesn't work, like, I'm going back home and I've spent a bunch of money to be here. I just had to make it work. So no matter what it took, I think when I first started digital nomading, it was a lot of getting used to, okay, there's always something to do. There's always somewhere to
Hmm.
go, but like, I still have to work. So whether it be waking up really early or working till the wee hours of the night, it's about
Right.
just putting that time in there. A lot of people have said to me, they're like, well, if I was traveling, I wouldn't have the motivation to keep working. But when you know
Mm.
that if you don't get your job done, like, you're going home, you
You're
will
going
like
back home
pull,
for sure.
yeah, you will just pull things out of you. Like, I'll be working at 3 a.m., like, whatever it takes to just make
Yeah.
it happen.
Right. I mean, and that also, just, brings me to remember something that someone said to me a couple of days ago. Like, when you're traveling constantly and you're in this, all this, places that are so beautiful, with so many people just, posting whatever you can post, say on a weekend, on a Saturday, whatever pictures you've taken over the weekend. People just kind of assume that you are on, constant vacation. Like, you're not working. Like, why, how do you get to travel? Like, how do you afford to do this? You're always posting pictures and whatnot, but the reality is, I mean, at least in my situation, I don't know how it's like for you. I work harder now than I would work if I was back in the United States. I wake up super early because now I'm 1 hour behind. So normally I would, start working at 9 until, whenever I'm done, say 4 or 5 p.m. But now I wake up super early because I didn't initially tell my teammates, I mean, my team members of my work, that I was traveling. I just, picked up, and I left because it's a remote job. And I realized that I wanted to be the best team member I can be, just do my own part of the work in such a way that nobody starts making up, this theory about me not, producing as much as I can because I'm somewhere chilling on the beach in Mexico. So now I tell people I'm working so hard now that sometimes it just feels like, what am I doing this for? But ultimately, travel life is something I've always wanted, and I would do anything, to stay on the road, if that means, waking up super early, like you said, or staying up late at night. So that's something I can definitely relate to. So now that you've been on the road for how long? For over a year. How many countries have you been to? Where have you? What countries have you been
Um,
to so far?
yeah, I lived in Mexico for about 6 months. Started in Tulum, made my way all the way to Puerto Vallarta, up and kind of down and around. And then I've done Croatia, Italy, Czech Republic, England, um, Spain, Portugal, went down to Hawaii as well. So since the pandemic has happened, I've done about 7 countries, and about
Wow.
80 cities. So I love to move around a lot. I'm someone that usually I'll stay in accommodation for about 5 days or a week and then move somewhere else and be in a city for about 2 weeks. So I know a lot of people that digital nomad, they tend to travel a lot slower. For
For
me,
sure.
especially while being in Europe, I love a change of pace. I love to go somewhere new, and keep things exciting. And I've also noticed by moving around so much, I get to meet so many other digital nomads just faster as well.
Right. Right. I mean, that's a lot of places in such a short period of time. I mean, I could I couldn't imagine traveling as fast as you do because I love to get in a routine. I love to just travel slowly and just, enjoy the destination a lot more, find a gym, go there a couple times a week, stay in shape and you know, just be in that place for a lot longer. I think I would burn out pretty fast if I just go as fast as you do. But hey, I mean, I think everyone has the way of doing things. I think that way works for you, and I know a lot of people that it works for as well. But for a lot of people, if you want to start traveling, because we see Instagram and YouTube and we see all of these digital nomads traveling to all these places like so fast, and that was the idea that I had in mind. Like I wanted to go to all of these countries like so fast. Like in my very few, but very short time of traveling, I've only been to about 6 or 7 countries so far, and that's in the space of 5 years. But I haven't done a lot of traveling the last 4 years. So I'm in Mexico City right now, and I will be here for maybe the next 3 weeks. I've been here for about 3 weeks now, and I just love it so much that I am kind of getting attached to it. But I know I'm gonna have to leave at some point. So yeah, because it's such a beautiful city. It has such a great mix of culture and modern architecture. The people are so nice, the food is so good, and I just love it so much. But I know I'm gonna have to leave, and I'm dreading that already. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about how you help other digital nomads, because while doing my research I realized that you have this entrepreneur venture where you help other digital nomads get on the road, whether that's finding remote opportunities like you did, or just getting in the right mindset to travel. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so basically, before I can get into that, the way that it all started, so I've been working remotely for a company out of California. Once the pandemic happened, I ended up having to re-sign a lease, and then I left about 2 months after that. However, I was still paying for that lease while traveling, and that's when I realized I was like, okay, I need to make more money. So
Right.
I launched a website, and ended up sending it to this girl who I met through like a digital nomad networking group, and she was like, "Hey, I showed my boss your website. We want to offer you this apartment in Croatia in exchange for some travel writing." And so I was
Wow.
like, whoa. So I immediately fly out to Croatia. Within 2 days, it ends up actually falling through. But
Oh.
later that week, someone comes up to me and they're like, "Hey, I'd like to hire you." And I'm like, "What do you mean you want to hire me?" And they're like, "Yeah, I heard you're a writer. I'd like to hire you." Well, that snowballed into where people started finding me. I started doing email marketing. I was doing content creation. And then, of
Mm,
course, my friends and family, they started to take notice like, "Whoa, Mikel, like, how are you making this money? How are you affording this? How are you?" And I'm like,
right.
"Oh, well, I'm working remotely and I'm doing freelance like on the side." And they were like, "Can you help me?" So then I started helping some of them, and then they started making good money. And so I was like, okay, obviously helping people find work online is a gift that is working for me, which made
Mm-hmm.
me develop a coaching program called Digital Exploration. And basically, in this program, the person is working one on one with me, but we're uncovering what is their online skill and how can we get them to doing that online in a way that they're comfortable of doing it, and then what other mental blocks do we need to uncover so that you can actually leave and travel. A lot of people, particularly for me, at being a female, as a female traveler, there's a lot of different thoughts that go through your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So we work a lot with uncovering kind of the back end stuff that's holding you back, because I think a lot of people that want this life, they definitely have the skills. They're just living a little bit in fear or don't think it's realistic. So we spend a lot of time
Yeah.
working on the mindset, and then just using their unique skills and transferable skills to find them a job that actually aligns with what they're passionate about. I know a lot of people working online be like, oh, just be a virtual assistant, just do data
Right.
entry. And like, that may work for some people. However, I think someone like me, I would feel very bored in that job. And
For
yeah,
sure.
it's great to work online, but it's not really great to work online if you don't enjoy what you're doing. Yeah, so it's just mainly about helping people find something that they're passionate about, so that they can work and travel as well.
Yeah, I mean that is such a brilliant idea because I know firsthand how, being in the right mindset to start with has a lot to do with whether or not you're going to start traveling at all or stay on the road. Because 5 years ago when I moved to the United States, like I always knew I wanted to travel. I always knew that I wanted to leave the digital nomad lifestyle, and I keep seeing people do it. And the question I always had was, how are these people doing it? Like, this guy is in Thailand, is in Bangkok, is in Bali, is in all these exotic places. Like, how is it happening? Like, what do they do online? In fact, there's a particular person that I follow. Maybe you might know him. His name is Jubril Agro is the founder of Passport Evi. They have one of the best YouTube travel channels. I mean, it's awesome what these guys are doing. I mean, the quality of their videos, and that was the first person I saw on Instagram back in 2017. I saw one of his ads on Facebook where it was just talking about how he's been leaving on the road and working at the same time, and I'm just like, who is this dude? Like, is also Nigerian and he travels. Like, maybe I can do the same thing, but I was just confused. So I followed him, and I've been following this guy now for almost 4 years, and I know that sometimes you can get caught up in like real life and day to day. You have a job, you get inundated with all of the stress and all that, and you just feel like, you know what, maybe this thing will never happen. So following these people and seeing every day, like day to day, what they do as being that motivation that I needed, because it helped me work on my mindset. And I would listen to a bunch of podcasts, travel podcasts, and listen to people like yourself who are doing it. And that just kept me locked in. Like, you know what, if I keep working hard, if I keep seeking information and just keep my mindset right, I know for a fact that one day I would get to a point where I would travel. So I think it's really important, that aspect of what you do, working on the mindset. Because when my friends ask me now, like, how are you traveling? Like, a few weeks before I get on the road, my friends were asking me, so what are you going to do about your job? I'm like, what job? I've been working remote for a long time now. What are you going to do about your apartment? Well, I'm not going to renew my lease. That's what I'm going to do. So what are you going to do about your car? Well, I'm going to get rid of it. That's what I'm going to do. So, a lot of these things, like, we just make up excuses to not do it. And I think it's important for people to understand, that this is actually very attainable, much more attainable than they think. So tell me about, how, you've been, able to help people. Like, how can people, find you? How can they, get in touch with you? Can they enroll in this program if they want to? And how can they, just basically take advantage of what you have to offer in terms of, your coaching and guidance?
Yeah, so you guys can always find me on Instagram, and that's going to be Mickelle_Sleyster. Or I also have a website inspired by influence, and my coaching program is on there. I also give out a lot of free resources on my free Facebook page, Facebook group, and that's aspiring digital nomads. You can find it on my regular Facebook page. But on there, I'm helping people. But I really am about making sure that when I'm helping you, like we're finding what's really going to work for you. And is going to make you happier in the long term. And kind of what you were saying, to just echo what you're saying about the mindset, it is so much mindset, especially once you actually start traveling and you realize, oh my God, I don't know anyone here. Everyone's
Right.
speaking a different language. What am I supposed to do? And if you are not mentally prepared for that or very confident in who you are, knowing that you've got your stuff together, you're just going to crumble because you've got to be able to stand on your feet and walk up and talk to a stranger, not be afraid to get lost, kind of throw some stuff to the wolves a little bit and just put yourself out there completely.
Absolutely. I mean, that is so much important. Like what you just mentioned now about, being in a new country, seeing new people, new faces every day, that can get like so mentally challenging. I know I felt a little bit that way. Like when I got to Mexico, I've been learning Spanish now for about 7 weeks before I got on the plane. And when I got here, it was completely different. Like I couldn't understand anything. And for the first couple of days, I felt like, you know what, I'm just going to stay in my Airbnb. I'm not going to go out because it was so stressful. Like you have to, talk to people and you don't want to sound stupid. And being the perfectionist that I am, that was something that I really struggled with. But now I'm trying to, just get outside of my feelings and just get out of my head a little bit and just do it. And that all stems down from, the mindset that I have because I know I'm going to be on the road for as long as I can and, into the indefinite future, and I'm gonna have to deal with it at some point. So that's really important too. So it, since you're been traveling, since you've been traveling for a while, have you ever had like any crazy experiences? Like what is the craziest experience you've had? Maybe good or bad, just for people to have an
Um,
idea what it's like on the road.
Honestly, I've been pretty lucky. I haven't had any moments where I was really, really scared or anything like that. I think the closest one was definitely I was in Rome, and I had caught a bus, and the bus it ended up running really late. And so I got back to Rome, and it was like past midnight, and my friend had ordered me an Uber off her phone, but her Uber got there before mine and my phone was dead. And so I was just waiting on the side of the street and people were like coming up to me saying random things. And after about 15 minutes of waiting, I was like, this Uber isn't here. I'm just going to get into a different car. So I got into a different car, got back, and my friend had texted me and was like, hey, that Uber ended up canceling. So thank God I just acted
Wow.
on impulse. But in my experience, my most sketchiest experiences that I've ever had have been in the US. So, like, I've
Mm.
traveled Mexico, I've traveled Europe, I've been in Eastern Europe as well. And I actually find both of them to be quite safe. I think it's just about being aware of your surroundings and definitely being
Right.
aware that you may not have some of the same rights that you have wherever you're from. So, like, for me,
True.
being a female, in some places, men are not going to treat me with the same level of respect as I'm used to in the US. For
Right.
example, while living in Greece, I did see like a bouncer punch my friend in the face, push her into the
Wow.
street, like a very extreme circumstance where I feel like you maybe wouldn't see that in the US. Um, but it's just recognizing your surroundings at all times, and then also too, because I'm not familiar, I'm not getting overly intoxicated or to a point where I can't handle myself. And that's the thing you always have to keep in mind. It's just you've always got to be aware. And the second that you're not aware, like who knows what could happen. But
Right.
luckily, I feel a lot safer actually outside the US. So,
And believe me, I've heard that a lot. I've heard people tell me that, especially people who, have lived in the US and now living somewhere else, tell me that, they feel much more, I mean, they feel freer outside of the US than they would if they were back in the US. There's just so much going on in the media. Like, they just force feed you with a lot of things. And honestly, that can be very tiring. Like, you look in the media, they tell you how to feel, basically. And with everything going on, I mean, honestly, I sometimes I mean, I've not sometimes, I think every time, I feel very lucky that I can say that I live in the US, because if I was back in Nigeria, not having like an option of where else to live or where to be a resident, I would have so very few options of, where to travel to. Because even right now, being a resident of the United States, I still have to apply for a visa for most of the places I want to go to. So I don't really have the option of, just picking up and leave and, having a visa on arrival, or having the luxury of not needing a visa. But the fact that I still can do this, being a year's resident, I'm very grateful for that. But at the same time, we need to know that it's a country that still needs some love. So I hope, I hope the leaders and everyone in there can just make it better. But I've heard that pretty often, that people tell me they feel a lot freer when they're outside the United States than they're inside. So if you're listening to this and you're wondering, what it's like out there, with safety and what you can expect on the road, well, you need to know that you're traveling somewhere else, to another person's country, another person's territory, and you have to abide by the rules, by the laws of of the land. And hopefully, you go somewhere that have more relaxed laws than the others. But always do your research. Like, wherever you want to go, make sure you learn about the place before going there, so that way you're always, you're always safe, and you're always, going by whatever law of the land there is in the country. So what would you say to someone who is probably on the brink of traveling right now, but they just are very skeptical? Like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know what to expect. Like, traveling, is that something that people do? What do you say to them?
um, I think that you wouldn't be drawn to traveling if there wasn't something out there that's meant for you. Like, you wouldn't
Right.
have this pull to go and do it if there wasn't something out there for you. And when it comes to what other people think and what you've heard, everyone's got an opinion. And that's what I've learned about traveling is, like, people will tell me, "Oh, Paris sucks. Paris is great." It's like everyone's got an opinion. Go into the place, be extremely open-minded and just ready to absorb and listen, because that's that's what I love about traveling, is just what I learn about people, which in turn helps me learn things about myself. And if you're thinking about doing it, then it's meant for you. You wouldn't have the idea to do it if it wasn't like supposed to be for you. You just wouldn't. You would be
Yeah.
very comfortable with what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, there you have it. Like, if you're thinking about it, if you even have a remote thought about traveling, then it means that something's drawing it to you. Drawing you to traveling, and you have, like, the fact that you entertain the idea in your brain means that you probably want to do it at some point, and maybe you should. So, just like you said, like, you just have to be prepared to learn new things, be super open-minded, because there's going to be a lot of teaching moments when you go to foreign countries, because travel really 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 changes you in a lot of very good ways. And I think it's the best thing that anyone can do for themselves, because at the end of the day, you will not remember the days where you worked overtime. You will only remember the days where you made some memories, and you met up with a random stranger at a bar, you started chatting it up, and you became friends for life. So I believe those are some of the things that travel does to you. And right now, people can find you on Instagram. And just before we go again, I just want you to give all your social media. Where can people find you, so they can at least have it registered in their minds? Of course, I will have it in the show notes as well.
Perfect. Yeah, so it's going to be Mickelle_Sleyster, which is Mickelle _Sleister, Sleyster. And then my website is Inspired by Influence. So that's kind of the best ways to find me in all of my different programs and stuff like that.
Awesome. Inspired by influence, inspired by freedom. So we were both inspired by at least one thing. This is, one question I always like to ask people. What inspired you? Maybe we talked about it, but could you look back and think about a moment that, where you just felt this is the life I want to choose, the moment that inspired you on this journey?
Yeah, so when I was living in Greece, I would hike up in the mountains every day, and there was this little spot that we'd go and watch the sunset. And I remember it was the last day I was watching it, and I was crying, and I was realizing that what stood between me seeing everything I'd seen over the 6 months and people that were sitting at home was paperwork. It was the paperwork that was holding them back. And that
Hmm.
moment, I realized I don't want paperwork, a job, or anything to hold me back from what's really out there in the world. Because it's these simple little things. It's putting in that extra hour applying for jobs. It's reaching out to people you don't know and asking how they get ahead that really are going to make a big difference and where you're going in the future.
Wow, that's very profound. I wanted to ask you something, but I think that is a very great way to end this conversation. Have people always remember that, what's standing in between you, where you are right now, and what's out there for you in the world. Because I made an Instagram post a couple of days ago, and I was just talking about how beautiful this planet is, and if we have the privilege to go out and see it, it would be a shame to not see what this planet has to offer, because it's just so beautiful, not just in the nature, but in the people that inhabit it, because there's more good people in the world than you can imagine and we can possibly imagine. We think about people and we think about, all of the bad things that people do, but there's so much good things that can come out of, you know, meeting strangers, because they say a stranger is just, a friend, a stranger is just if someone who you haven't got to meet yet, and yeah, thank you for sharing all of this insights. And I I loved, every aspect of your story. And what's next for you?
Yeah, so I am going back to Europe on November 1st. Going to spend a month in maybe Spain. That's where I'm leaning towards at the current moment. I'm an intuitive traveler, so I'll just go wherever my intuition will kind of pull me. And then January, South Africa, and then hopefully Bali come February, March. So really
Wow.
hoping to explore Asia, and hopefully coronavirus is kind of fading into the rear view mirror for my travel plans.
For sure. Yeah, those are very interesting choices. Well, Mikhail, thanks for joining me on the show. Thanks for sharing all this story. I really appreciate it, and I'm pretty sure the audience appreciates it as well. And I just want to wish you all the best in your journey, and hopefully we get to chat it up again at some point, and probably catch up with you, see what you're up to in a couple months, in a year, and yeah, thank you for coming.
Perfect. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Have a great rest of your day, guys.
Absolutely. All right, Mikhail. Bye.
Bye.
Well, there you have it. I want to say thank you to Mikhail for coming on the show and sharing that story with us, sharing a story of how she got started traveling, and just how you can be inspired as well to get out on the road and see more of the world. I always say that this planet is such a beautiful place, and if you have the choice, if you have the privilege or the option to go out and see it, please do it. Some of the things that you might be wondering, just like we've discussed on the show, that how do you make money doing it? How do you get on the road without having to worry about affordability? How do you afford to travel? Well, we talked about all of that, and a lot of people feel like getting a remote job and traveling indefinitely cannot be attainable. Maybe it's just for a certain group of people, and just a certain group of people have access to that kind of lifestyle. But I'm here to tell you that if you put your mind to it, if you really want to do this, you only need to start looking into the right places and in the right direction. And once you set your mind to it, I believe things will start working out in your favor. You don't have to be a tech-savvy person in order to get a remote job or in order to start working remotely. Whatever you have going on in your life right now, you can definitely transition that into a remote work. All you need really are transferable skills. If you have transferable skills, you can definitely start looking for opportunities in your field or in a different field. And you can also work with Mickelle. She does, Digital Nomad coaching, where she helps you get your mindset right. And you can reach out to her. I'll leave her contacts in the show notes. You can reach out on Instagram. You can email. And I'm pretty sure your dream of becoming a digital nomad can come to life. Well, thanks for listening to this podcast, my friend, and I hope you enjoy it. I will be having a lot of great conversation with other digital nomads and entrepreneurs in the coming days and weeks, and you can always look forward to those kind of conversations on this podcast, and we will be having them uploaded as soon as they are ready, hopefully once or twice a week. And you can always come back here and you will find something to enjoy listening to. Again, my name is Daniel Falonipe, and thank you again for listening to the podcast, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye.
How powerful is Cox Internet? So powerful that one day, your daughter will be able to simulate a soccer match against some of the world's best players right from your backyard. Get gig speeds powered by fiber from Cox. It's internet built for tomorrow, today. Internet delivered through Cox's hybrid fiber coax network. Speeds vary and are not guaranteed. Cox terms and other restrictions apply.